Will Australia get a first series win on English soil in 22 years, or can England level it up after being 2-0 down after 2 tests? Alongside me, the former England selector James Taylor, ex-England assistant coach and current Sussex Director of Cricket Paul Farbrace, and the cricket journalist and broadcaster Melinda Farrell. Mel, let's start with talking about that 4th test at Old Trafford. How was the end of that game for you?
Yeah, I was reduced to standing out the back of the press box just hugging a pole for a good portion of the afternoon. And everyone kept walking past me saying, "You look like how I feel." And it was just so frustrating. Rain delays and washouts always are frustrating, but just to come as it did with the series in such an interesting position with so much exciting cricket being played, it was very disappointing that it happened. And I think it was almost worse because we knew it might possibly happen. So there was that expectation as well. So, yeah, it wasn't great. It wasn't my best day at the cricket ever.
No, I think that would be an understatement. James, how about you? Where were you watching it? What was going through your mind?
I was actually at home. I was meant to be at a game, but our game finished early, so it gave me a great opportunity to sit and try and watch some entertaining cricket, as is always the way when England play Australia, but it wasn't to be. For once, we as Englishmen got the weather forecast right, which was a real shame.
Look, let's just put to one side the disappointment of Old Trafford and look ahead to the Oval, because even though Australia have retained the Ashes, and maybe that's a question for another time about whether retention is a good thing or not, that you get this automatic advantage by already holding them before the series starts. Both teams have got a lot to play for, haven't they, in this final test match, Paul, because Australia want to be the first team since Steve Waugh's team in 2001 to actually win the series outright. And England are desperate not to be the first to lose it.
Absolutely, and it's set brilliantly. You know, there's so much, and listening to everyone talking about the rain and how it's really affected the series. This series is still very much alive. This is still and could be one of the greatest ever Ashes series I can remember watching. And this last Test match is set up brilliantly because even in the last few days, there's been so much about we're sore losers because we're moaning about the weather, and we can spend hours talking about how Test matches change because of the weather, and that makes it such a great game. But there is so much on this game. England want to win this desperately, they really do, and Australia, as you say, want to be the team. And this group of players who've taken a fair bit of stick in the last few weeks want to be the team that actually wins the series 3-1 and goes home with the Ashes, saying we've earned them really by playing really good cricket. So I think there's so much on this game at the Oval, and in many ways I hope it is yet another fantastic game because it would finish the series off brilliantly.
I mean, it is remarkable, isn't it, when you look at the records, to think that the only side to have won an Ashes series, not just retaining, but to win an Ashes series away from home, was England in 2010-11. It made me sit up and look at that twice, Mel, when I saw that.
Well, it is really hard to win away from home. I think sometimes it's not always appreciated by people just how difficult it is to win Test series away. It's actually reasonably rare that teams can do that to each other. So that 2010 achievement was absolutely remarkable. And the fact that, people... There was a lot of talk in Australia about, especially having beaten England in Australia so convincingly last time, that it was almost a lay down misère and they'd be all over England. But it's really hard to come here and beat England. And I absolutely agree with Farby, by the way, that there is so much. I've written a piece today basically saying that this is very, very much a live rubber. It's not a dead rubber. There's plenty of life in it yet. Just because you won't want to have, each side won't want to actually end up not achieving what they've set out to achieve, certainly in Australia's case, hell-bent on winning for the first time since 2001. And there's no, like England, their backs are still to the wall, and that's when we've seen them play their best cricket in this series, since they were 2-0 down.
And this business about being sore losers, I noticed that Harry Brook said in his press conference yesterday, James, we haven't lost. They lost the first 2 tests, but we haven't lost the series.
No, and he's right. England certainly haven't lost a series, albeit they can't win the series. This can certainly put a dent in Australia's record. Australia, for me, are the best side in the world. And again, they've proved it throughout this series. Yes, England played some excellent cricket and so entertaining. I didn't think Australia have been at their best either. And that's credit to England, but also that shows how good Australia are, competing so well, obviously up in the series and not being at their best. But England will want to desperately win this series. And it's one thing playing entertaining cricket, which they do. They're the most exciting team in the world, without doubt, to watch. But they want to win games as well. No matter what is said, they will be wanting to win games. And the Oval is another massive one against their arch enemies in the Ashes. And to draw the series, they'll be desperate to win this game at the Oval.
Let's hear from Ben Stokes, the England captain. He's named an unchanged team for the Oval, and he says England are feeling relaxed after the events of Old Trafford.
Obviously another quick turnaround. The lads took the last few days pretty easy and sort of got everyone down here to go through their paces, and everyone says they're good to go.
I suppose, although it was a really sad end, the fact that there were a couple of quiet days at the end has helped that, has it?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that could be positive from it, I guess. But yeah, it was a strange one. Can't remember the last time I left the ground sort of with no emotion. It was a very strange feeling leaving the dressing room. You sort of go, do we almost think we'd rather have either gotten beat, or if we got out there and Australia managed to hang on for a draw, like who knows? But yeah, it was a very weird feeling leaving Old Trafford that day, obviously with the last few days, and I think it's the first time in a while where we've all just sort of felt like nothing leaving the sports ground. Yeah, it was an odd one.
Is there any consolation? I interviewed Pat Cummins and he was hardly over the moon either.
Yeah, I think that's, we're both teams are professional athletes, and it's one of those where you sort of both teams haven't been able to really do anything, and you sort of get a result. So you can understand it obviously from our point of view and Australia's point of view. I'm sure that although they did retain the Ashes that game, they would have preferred maybe to have a bit more of a game towards the back end of the days. But yeah, strange one.
One thing that has caught traction, Ben, is the idea of retaining the Ashes. Why can't you just draw the Ashes? Is that something that think the authorities should look at? Because it always gives the team that already has the Ashes a bit of a head start, but also it kind of nullifies this last game if it's in this situation.
I don't think I've given too much thought about that, but I think you look at it for the series as itself. Australia want to come here and win the Ashes. We want to win this game because we don't want to be able to say Australia won this series. So I guess when it peters down to that, I think both teams will obviously want to win this game for different reasons, and whoever manages to have the Ashes before the next one starts obviously have sort of deserve to have it. But yeah, I don't know, I don't think that will ever change it, because it's sort of been a thing of the Ashes for a long time.
How do you think England's game has evolved over these 4 test matches so far?
Goodness.
It was quite full on at Birmingham. I'm just suggesting perhaps it wasn't quite so full on at Old Trafford. It was kind of, people are calling it baseball with brains.
Well, it's probably because we played well and we executed what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
I think it's probably an easy thing to say when you score at 5 point whatever it was and over. It's quite hard to say that we weren't doing what we were trying to do in the first few games.
But the fields were back. It seemed to be a bit more careful run scoring at that sort of pace.
No, I don't think so. No, I think everyone was still trying to go out there and put the intent onto the opposition at all times, and Zach showed that. Everyone who went out there showed that, and
Why was it more successful then at Old Trafford than earlier on?
Because our execution was better.
I guess that goes back to question one then. Why was the execution better at Old Trafford than earlier on?
Well, if everyone could put their finger on why execution was better, then they'd be a genius. Sometimes your execution isn't what you always want it to be, and unfortunately that can sometimes end in things not going your way.
No. How can you make sure the execution's good over the next 5 days then? I can nail you down on this, Ben, at some stage.
Well, I don't know. If anyone can give the answer on that, then they'll be the best coach in the world.
All right. Stuart Broad, I don't think anyone would have given him high odds of playing every test match, all 5. I mean, that's really quite something.
Yeah, it's been incredible. I mean, obviously I said it quite a few times before the series started, we all knew as a bowling group that it'd be very difficult for a bowler to play all 5, but he's been awesome, hasn't he? He's still leading wicket taker in the series, and yeah, he's just. It's very hard to look past someone like that who's had such a big impact at important times throughout the whole series. So look, you got to give him a huge amount of credit for being able to string. This will be the 5th game of the series in a row together, and I guess that's testament to all the hard work he puts in off the field.
And also, you talked about legacy at Old Trafford, didn't you? How important is that legacy, or at least the result of this match, to that legacy going forwards, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think it'll be important, more important to people outside of the group. We're very aware as a group about what we sort of want to achieve going forward, even from beyond this game. And I think we've been very clear about that even before the series started. And look, we want to win this game. And if things don't go our way this game and we don't end up being on the right side of the result, things will not stop and we will not be hampered by the result of the series, and that will not dictate how we go about things in series to come.
Very last one. Jimmy Anderson. Is his selection here a touch of sentimentality, or is it just best 11 on the field?
Best 11 on the field.
Well, Ben Stokes, interesting interview with Jonathan Agnew, as always. We'll come back to the whole slight prickliness maybe about the approach and how that's developed through the series. We'll come back to that in a moment. But let's go in with the selection first of all. And the fact that James Anderson is going to play at the Oval, that's despite him taking just 4 wickets in this series. Paul and James, what do you think about that first of all? Fabi, what do you reckon?
Well, I don't think it is sentimental. I think it's very much about, when you come to your big games, you want your big players, you want your best players available playing for you. And this is a huge game for England. And Ben Stokes doesn't want to take any risks with who he puts in the side. Does he bring someone back who's had a back spasm? Does he play someone who's only played 1 or 2 games? No, he wants his best players. You want your best players. And look, in a moment, I'm sure James would say, from a selector's point of view, you have half an eye on the game in front of you and you have half an eye on the game coming up and the series coming up, and that's what you have to do as selector. If I was in the England coaching staff right now, I'd be saying to the captain, we need our best players, we need the here and nows, not worry about the future. This is about winning this next game in front of us, and you want your big players. So I don't think it's got anything to do with sentimentality. And let's be honest, Jimmy Anderson is not about him. This is not about him saying, I want a great send-off, because we all know that he'll probably get back to Lancashire and drop someone a note and say, oh, by the way, I've retired, because that's how he is. It's not all about him. It's never been about him. And I think this is absolutely the right choice. Broad and Anderson in a game you have to win, fantastic. Absolutely pick them every day of the week.
Yeah, I totally agree with Farbs. I think it was quite cheeky of Aggers to say it was sentimental. Without doubt, Jimmy is in your top 4 bowlers in your squad, and that's exactly why Ben, the coaches and the selectors have picked Anderson. He is world class and still is still one of England's best bowlers, and that's exactly why he's playing in this game. And it's a must-win game for England, so you want your best bowlers on the field.
There have been points, haven't there, in this series? I mean, Michael Vaughan did say basically that he thought that the selection of Jimmy Anderson effectively cost England the Ashes, and I'm not quite sure how true that is, but he said Jimmy, in the 3 test matches he's played in this series, has had no impact at all. I don't remember him getting a key wicket at any stage, and that's very unlike Jimmy Anderson. But I mean, Mel, he's been quite unlucky, hasn't he? And I'm thinking about edges which could have gone between bat and stumps. He could have had a few play. He's had a lot of plays and misses. The pitches haven't suited him terribly well. But I mean, he doesn't think he's bowled badly.
No, I mean, he did say after Edgbaston that if the pitches were all like that, well, that pitch was basically his kryptonite. I think what's been really interesting about Jimmy Anderson is how he has evolved in the last even just 16 months, which is quite incredible for a bowler of his experience. But there have been times that he's bowled in completely different ways to how he would normally bowl. It hasn't necessarily been him with the new ball, swinging the ball in the first sort of stages of the match. He's done different things around the world, whether it's bowling short, whether it's coming in at first change. And he also brings massive amount of experience. You see him talking to the other bowlers at the tops of their marks all the time. So, and you're right, there are times when he was very unlucky and could have taken wickets. And there are times that the pitches haven't suited him. And there are times that he probably hasn't bowled his best either. But he's still keen to do whatever the team does, and I don't discount his experience, certainly, or the contribution that he makes to the team in a multitude of ways.
I was just about, I think that was spot on from Mel. We covered so many bases there, but I think it's just remarkable how good Jimmy is. And you kind of see it firsthand when you're on the field with him. And I've done that, been lucky enough to do that a few times in the subcontinent where the pitches are so flat, the ball is doing nothing. But that man finds a way to have an impact, whether that's controlling the scoreboard and building the rate by having an extraordinarily good economy rate and also chipping in with the odd wicket. He is a dream as a captain to have in your side because he controls the rate and he will always chip away and take wickets. It's unfortunate for him and England that he hasn't managed to do that this series, but it's a small sample size. It's a couple of games on some really flat featherbed wickets which haven't suited Jim, and he said it himself. He is good enough to take wickets on these surfaces, but it obviously hasn't been his series. That's why he's frustrated.
Yeah, and I would, the point I was going to make, and James, you absolutely right. Following on what Mel said then, the biggest change in Jimmy, and we keep hearing him talking about, I've never enjoyed playing Test match cricket so much. I've never seen him smile so much. I've never genuinely seen him give so much. And that's not because he isn't a team player, because that would be grossly unfair. But the way that he has adapted his game is such a great point, because it was very difficult at times to get him to maybe adjust his length. His way of working was bowl back of a length, keep people tight, and then pitch one up, nick them off, or LBW bowl. That was his way of getting his wickets. I think Mel's absolutely right. In the last 18 months, under Stokes and McCullum, I've seen a bloke who at the age of 39-40 is actually showing that he is prepared to change the way that he bowls. It allows other people to get wickets and other people to have success. Now, he's never been a selfish, it's all about me. I've said that a few times, but what he has done is shown that he is prepared to bowl short spells. He's prepared to bowl short pitch deliveries. He's prepared to bowl cross seam when it's needed to. And he's taken away from some of the ways of him getting wickets to allow the team to get wickets, to allow the team to win. And I think that is why Ben is so keen to keep him in the team, because he has shown that at this age and stage of his career, he has adapted. But to hear him talking about how much he's enjoying playing Test match cricket, and this is the most enjoyable time of his career, is fantastic. And that's why you want that sort of character in your team. And that is a brilliant point for Mel, and it is absolutely spot on.
Well, you say he's 39-40. He's going to be 41 on Sunday.
Well, I was trying to give him a bit of help along the way.
Yeah, it's not all about age. It's not all about age.
Definitely
but
not.
it is about attitude, isn't it? And as he said in his column in the Telegraph today, I love playing Test cricket as much as I ever have. This is my favourite period, as you said, Fabi, as an England cricketer. Just being around this group, the way we play and how we enjoy ourselves on the field. There are no thoughts about retirement. I think, James, you and I actually had the conversation about this, didn't we, earlier in the summer, when we talked about who is going to be the person who will say to Jimmy Anderson, it's time to stop? And I think the conclusion that we came to is that nobody can tell Jimmy Anderson it's time to stop, apart from Jimmy.
Yes, or the selectors, if they're brave enough to not pick him. I think also, if you look at Jimmy's fitness record recently, it's been brilliant, considering his age. And yes, he's had a couple of niggles, but his fitness results away from off the cricket field are outstanding, and he's as fit as he's ever been. And that's not just a throwaway comment either. His results in the fitness test will show that. It's just quite remarkable. He's always desperate to learn as well. He's always evolving, as we've spoken about. And he's still in your top 4 bowlers in your squad, in and around the squad. So he's going to continue to play for as long as he wants to. And as long as his levels are up at the level that you want in international cricket, still one of the best bowlers in the world for me. And it's remarkable what he still continues to do for this England side. And I think it's credit to, we're talking a lot about Jimmy there, but I think it's credit to Ben Stokes as a leader to galvanise such an experienced bowler and such one of the best seam bowlers ever, to keep willing him on and challenging him in different ways and allowing him to have fun and allowing the squad to have fun and enjoy it so much. I think that's credit to Ben Stokes.
Yeah, and we've seen the way that he works with the other bowlers as well, doesn't he, Fabi? You know, you've been around him in a team environment. Has he always kind of wanted to pass on this knowledge to younger players?
Yeah, yes, he has, but it's more, I think it's more the adaptation, as Mel was saying, about how he actually performs on the field. I think that's the one really obvious thing for me. Yeah, look, he has always helped, and he's, we've all joked in the past about, the grumpy persona and whatever, but actually the bloke really cares, and he really wants the team to do well. He's always put team first. It's never been about Jimmy Anderson. It's always been about team, and even when he's reached major milestones, gone past Ian Botham's record, whatever it might be, it was never about him. It was always a small little celebration, but it was always about team. The point I was going to make was I had I think dubious pleasure of telling both Stuart and Jimmy that they weren't selected for the next one-day series in 2015, which they've never played for England white ball cricket since. And so when Tales was saying then about, if the selectors are brave enough, it was left to me in that sort of interim period when I was caretaker to tap them both on the shoulder on the outfield at Headingley after the Test match against New Zealand and say, by the way, you're not playing in the one-day series. And I honestly can't tell you their reaction because I didn't hang around long enough to find out. I nipped off to do something else.
The question actually of how you. I mean, I think Jimmy Anderson he's not retiring. Let's say this now. And I think the point that you make, James, is correct as well, is that, actually in the end, it should be the selectors that make a call on when somebody's career ends. And you look at the way that David Warner, Mel, has come out and said he's chosen the Test match that he wants to retire at. Who has that luxury? Who has that opportunity to do that?
Yeah.
Unless you're Alistair Cook, of course.
Well, yeah, there's that. I mean, it's an interesting one because even when he said that initially, he also said that, look, it might not come to that. I might not last that long. He was well aware. It's just he's mapped out publicly, this is how I'd like my exit plan to play out. And we all know that often that doesn't happen with so many cricketers. The fairy tale end just doesn't come, and when it does, it is quite rare. The funny thing about that this week was that when we found out over here that David Warner was going to do some media, that got out to some outlets back in Australia. And all of a sudden, it caused a massive flurry because they assumed that he was speaking to the media to announce his immediate retirement or that he was going to retire after the Oval Test. And then he almost wasn't going to speak to us at all because he was getting hounded left, right and centre. So there's that anticipation all around the media at any moment. Could it happen? Because he has done better this series than he did last time in England. But he hasn't
a low bar.
Yeah, that was a very, very low bar, and it still hasn't felt like his. Well, he hasn't. He hasn't set the series alight. Usman Khawaja has outshone him when it comes to the opening stakes, but it's just one of those really funny things where everyone is waiting. I don't know if he will get it. I'd say it's probably likely that he will get to go out in the way that he wants to, not because that there's the idea of the sentimental pick. I just think he'll do better in Australia anyway. There'd be a big call to bring in someone new like a Matt Renshaw for the final test that they have to win to win the Ashes outright. So I can see them giving him that series against Pakistan and Australia as well. So he probably will get his own fairy tale ending.
Let's just quickly talk about the other bowlers in this group, the team environment. I mean, we'll talk about their ages in a second because inevitably you're going to talk about the next Ashes down under and who is going to be there for that. But Mark Wood has just brought so much to this team and to that group as well. Have a listen to this from earlier on when he hijacked Ben Stokes' press conference.
Usual drill, we'll start with James, then Joe, and then we'll do a written huddle for the UK. You are.
Oh no. Guess which player is up there then?
Woody?
You got it.
Yep, that was Mark Wood playing Barbie Girl on his phone, and he later on followed up with a bit of Star Wars as well. This is the fun side of Mark Wood, but I mean he is he is such a serious bowler, and he's such, that difference when Mark Wood and actually Chris Woakes came into the team, Fabi, has been extraordinary, hasn't it?
It has completely transformed the England team. It really has. And to watch Woody bowling and enjoying bowling so much, that's the thing that, he has been through so much to get to this stage. So many injuries. He's missed so many test matches throughout his career. But he's always the bloke you want in your squad. You want him in your team. You want him in your squad. But the great thing is that, for all the fun and enjoyment that he brings to everybody around the team, it doesn't matter who you are around the team, he brings a lot of fun. But what he also brings is that real match-winning ability. And to watch him bowl in this test series has been sensational. I'm a huge fan of Woakes, always have been. I expected Woakes to start in the series. And when he came in again, what he added was great balance with the bat. He added great sensibility, if you want, for a better word, with the ball. And he is just one of those guys, again, that you want in your team. And I know everyone goes on about his record at home and overseas, but for this series, I would have started with him. I think Woakes is an outstanding cricketer. He goes under the radar on so many occasions. And I can think of so many games, both home and abroad, with the bat and the ball that he's won for England to get them over the line. He is an outstanding cricketer, and the two of them have changed this England team.
So the funny thing is, when you say that about him going under the radar, I was saying in the press box the other day that when he took the 4 wickets on day 2, I just said, this has been the most Chris Woakes day ever. This is everything about him, right? Because, at Headingley, he hits the winning runs and everyone goes, oh, Mark Wood. And then he takes 4 wickets. It's like, oh, Stuart Broad's got his 600. And then the next day he takes a, 5 and it's all Zach Crawley, and it just this happens all the time with Chris Woakes. He never ends up talking to the media, even when he took 2 wickets in 1 over, one with a brilliant ball. Everyone goes, "Oh, Johnny Bairstow, what a great catch!" It just always seems to happen with Chris Woakes, and he's so understated anyway. He's not one to sort of be out there bigging himself up. So I've actually really loved seeing him do so well, even though there seems something that happens on any particular day that gets the headline. He has been outstanding. And the Mark Wood thing, there are 2 aspects to Mark Wood that I think have been, and they're completely different in this series, that I think have been great to watch. One is that the Australians haven't really found an answer. They've sort of denied that it's not that they don't have answers, but I don't think they have really to the way he's bowled, because he's taken the pitches out of the equation. It almost doesn't matter when you're bowling that quickly and that well. It will take that out if the pitch isn't actually aiding much. But also, he's been able to get movement through the air, which has been interesting. The other aspect that has made him so key to this series is almost irrelevant to the contest, but it is that everybody in the ground is up and on the edge of their seats and so enthralled when he comes in. He's just got everybody so excited. And even when he came out with the bat and smacked the ball around the way he did at Headingley, and he did that in Hobart when Australia lost that series as well, remember? It's not the first time he's bashed Pat Cummins for 6. So I just think he's also been a great addition for everything off the field as well, because if you're doing something else around the house and then you can hear that Mark Wood's coming on to bowl, you're going to start paying attention, whether it's on TV or the radio.
And also the dressing room get 5 minutes rest when he goes into bat. That's the other big thing. When Woody goes out to bat, you hope that he bats for at least half an hour, because he just gives you half an hour peace and quiet. Because he is the life and soul, but he's also, I think the other aspect that people forget with him, he's been through so many injuries. He's had so much time out of the game, but he's worked so hard to get himself back and get himself fit. So to see him having this sort of series and getting the credit that he deserves, and people actually to recognise, the skill that he has. Some of the deliveries he's bowled, you're absolutely right, he has taken the pitch out of the game, but the pace at which he's bowled, and you're absolutely right, that the swing that he's got on the ball, the shape he's got on the ball, he's learned and developed that, and that's only down through hard work. But again, he's another is another player that I genuinely think that, under Ben Stokes, he gets the best out of people. He gets people running through brick walls for him because they know that he would do the same for them. And that's why, again, his consistency of selection reminds me very much of Owen Morgan. When he stuck with someone, he picked them, he stuck with them. And I think Ben has done exactly that, and players respond to that. Players respond to being loved and wanted, and if you do that, you get the best out of them. And we're seeing that with both, Wood and Woakes, which has been brilliant to watch. It really has.
And I think there was no doubt in anyone's mind, and this is the frustration really of what happened at Old Trafford, James, that England would have taken those last 5 wickets and knocked off whatever runs that they were set, provided the weather had stayed good, which obviously it didn't. But actually the variation that England have had, and I'm not saying that they're a world-beating bowling attack, but actually in the context of that game, there was no question in my mind, James, that England would have gone on and won that game.
No, I totally agree with you. And when you've got the options that Ben Stokes has now with his bowling attack, with Mark Wood, he complements the side beautifully. And when I was a selector, one thing that we desperately wanted was variety in our attack, whether that's a left arm option or whether that's somebody of high pace. You want a point of difference. And Mark Wood brings that. We speak a lot about skill with the bat and the ball, but Mark Wood's, for me, an outstanding skill of his is being able to, yes, get injured, which is incredibly frustrating, but then come back without playing any cricket for a couple of months, 3 months, and then come back faster than the previous time. I think in his second over, he bowled 95.6 miles an hour. It's phenomenal what that as a skill in itself, what Mark Wood can do in coming back from injuries, which is incredibly hard on your body, obviously, but also mentally, and coming back so well like he's done and being a breath of fresh air in the dressing room, but also on the field. And a real fear factor. England are now feared with the ball as well as they're feared with the bat. When Mark Wood's bowling, people don't like it, and it's great to watch.
Right, James, give me your bowling attack for the next Ashes down under, or probably maybe more pertinently the Ashes here in 4 years' time, because, Jimmy is 41 on Sunday, as we've said, Stuart 37, Chris Woakes is 34, Mark Wood is 33. We can't keep bringing Moeen back all the time, much as brilliant though he's been at times in this series. Who is there that's going to make it to that first test in 4 years?
That is thanks for throwing that one up, really. But
yeah, good luck with that one, Tidge.
Yeah. Good job. I've been doing it for the last few years with England. Obviously you've got Wood, who is 33 now. You've got Archer, Robinson, Woakes, Curran. These are the senior guys, and people forget about Sam Curran. He's a great option as a character in your side, but also that left arm option. I'm going to reel off a few names, and then we can decide who's the top 4 bowlers. Then on your current pace contracts with England, you've got Fisher, you've got Stone, you've got Saqib Mahmood, Bryden Carse, Craig Overton, and Jamie Overton. So there's a number of guys that offer you so many different things. Pace, obviously skill in Craig Overton, but you've got some good pace options there that you need in Australia. When the ball's not doing much laterally with those Kookaburra balls on those hard surfaces in Australia, you need pace, and we've got that in those guys that are already on pace contracts. So England will be looking after those guys and looking ahead to the future as those guys being an option. But also who we've seen recently in England colours, you've got Josh Tong and Matthew Potts as well, who will be a good option moving forward. So we've got some good height and we've got some good pace there, as well as skill, lots of skill. So those guys you'd imagine will be in the mix, and as well as guys that are clinging on, those senior guys that I mentioned in terms of Wood. It'll be great to see Archer back in the mix and somewhere. Obviously in a couple of years' time you'd imagine he won't have the pace, that X-factor pace, but it's amazing. Everybody speaks about pace of Archer, but the control and skill level he's got is remarkable to see. And then I imagine Woakes might not be around, but Curran certainly will be in the mix as well.
It's a good job you're not a selector any longer, though, Titch, with the ones that are currently clinging on. It's a good job you're not selected anymore. I think there'll be a few giving you a text tonight.
They'll be clinging on a few years' time, that's for sure.
We should ask you, Fabi, how is Jofra at the moment?
He's going well. So, he is going well, and I think, he's on course for the World Cup, which is fantastic news. And he's going nicely. So I think England will need to work out how they get the best out of him over the next few years. If he is to go to that next Ashes series, and as Titch quite rightly points out, even the last time they went, I remember Chris Silver talking about having 6 available. By the time they got to Australia, none of them were available because of injuries, and that's where I've got 11, 12 names written down here, exactly the same names, and I was thinking about earlier today the sorts of bowlers who are going to be available in 2 years' time, and absolutely you need pace through the air, because you know that in Australia you're not going to get a lot off the surface, so you need pace through the air, you need people who can hit the pitch hard, and we do need to have a Mark Wood or a couple of Mark Woods in the team. Hopefully Ollie Stone will be fit for then. You hope that Wood and Wokes, I think they will be available for the next Ashes series down under. I think they will get there. Carse I really like. Josh Tongue I think has been outstanding. And I think, Fisher, very impressive. I really like Fisher. I've always liked him. So I think there is enough depth in English cricket, and I think we've got enough high quality bowlers who can keep developing, and in another 2 years' time we'll be in a really good position.
But also on top of these fast, tall bowlers that we've spoken about there, you've got the likes of Sam Cook, Gus Atkinson. Obviously Atkinson's got some pace himself, and a really high release point, which is really useful in those conditions. But Sam Cook, such a skillful bowler, that I was in Australia with him the previous Ashes tour when we took the Lions over there, and somebody that can bowl you line and length, repeat, be metronomic, can still do you a job if their skill levels are good enough and consistent enough and bothering the batsman in and around off stumps. So bowlers, you do need guys to complement you, and you need guys to complement your attack, like Chris Wokes, Jimmy Anderson. Sam Cook comes in that mould of cricketer.
We wanted to talk about the mentality of England in this series, and kind of Agger's tried to get something out of Ben Stokes about this, but he was giving him nothing about whether they've changed their approach to Bazball, whether this is Bazball with brains, as we were calling it at Old Trafford. But they have stuck with the principles despite losing those first 2 tests. Let's hear from Harry Brook, who says England have moved on from Old Trafford and are fully focused on the final test.
We're just going to go out there and try to play the same way we have done. And there's a test match to be won there, so yeah, we're going to go out there and try and take it to them again.
Do you feel that having missed out on the chance of that, what looked like a heavy win at Old Trafford, there's that real incentive now to show what you can do as a side?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have that every time we go out to play, to be honest. I don't just think it was that game. Obviously there was a lot on the line there, and so be it that it's happened now. You've got to move on, and yeah, we've got a test match to be won here, so fully concentrated on that now.
Does this feel like a side that has maybe missed out on a bit of luck in this Ashes series, and particularly that Old Trafford game, and maybe you haven't been able to get the results that perhaps, as some have said, that your dominance has deserved?
Yeah, well, maybe, but I don't go into too much detail. You probably know that by now. There's certain points in all 3 test matches, or 4 test matches, which we could have won the game, they could have won the game. There's all sorts of different little aspects of the game. Obviously the weather last week clearly didn't help, but yeah, it'd have been class coming here 2-2 and playing this week, but yeah, we can't think too much about that.
Is there a degree of freedom now that the Ashes dream has gone, but there is still an Ashes test match to play? Does that give you a little bit of psychological freedom?
I think we have enough freedom as it is. I don't think we need much more.
Well, that was Harry Brook speaking to Henry Moran. I might start with you on this, Mel. There's been some interesting Australian reactions to Bazball, haven't there? And I think Ben Horn, one of your colleagues, wrote a piece saying, look, Bazball has not cured world hunger. They've not saved Test cricket. It's almost kind of get back in your box, England, with your Bazball. You're not reinventing the wheel. How do you sum up that mentality?
Well, the mentality of the criticism, and I even see that within some of the criticism that's coming from within England is a very Australian thing that we call tall poppy syndrome. That everyone loves something at first when it's really good, and then after a while it's just we want to cut it down. And I kind of feel that's what's happened a bit. People have quite short memories in sport, and so some of the people who were raving about what England did, whether it was last summer or in Pakistan or in New Zealand, whatever it was, are now kind of turning on it a bit and trying to cut the grass from under them. And it's funny, you know, I've been to a lot of Ben Stokes press conferences and interviews, and I know which questions are going to get short shrift from him now when they're being asked. And I can see why being asked or being told that people are calling it Bazball with brains would have irked him, because that implies that Bazball until now has been brainless. And that's not going to wash well with them, because it's not brainless, you know. There's a lot. Sometimes I think England almost, by talking about the whole, we want to be a legacy team, we want to do this, we want to do everything else, that means people don't see how much thought there is, and intelligence, and the tactics behind it, because there is so much of all of that. It's very intelligent and it's very smart about cricket. It's not always going to come off, and I don't know whether because it's been so great for the past 16 months that now that because they lost a couple of games and it's the Ashes, people are more likely to turn on them. But I think it's just, you know, that I don't know if you can just go half and half in on what they're trying to do and for it to still work. And so I can see why some of them bristle sometimes at some of those questions.
Can I just jump in there? I understand when people say they aren't reinvented the wheel, people have done this before. Nobody's ever done what they're doing right now with the rate that they're scoring at for such a long period of time, for the amount of games since Ben Stokes took over. Nobody's ever done that. And the stats suggest that or back that up. I think it's remarkable what they've done for such a long period of time. I thought it was going to be great, but then the bubble was going to burst. But the fact that they've been able to do it for so long against different oppositions on different surfaces, or as I was going to say different surfaces, but if you notice, the surfaces that they've played on have been pretty good surfaces, and they will be a hard side to beat on flatter surfaces for me, England. But what's amazing is this is the best side in the world that they're playing against, and it's the best bowling attack in the world, and they've put them to the sword. You see what they did at Old Trafford, and that was the fourth game of this series. You'd imagine Australia would have had their plan sorted for the fourth game to be able to undo this swashbuckling attack that England are going to go with the bat. But it shows how skillful they are, and their plans are in a good place, England, with the bat, that this great Australian bowling attack have been done again. So I think a lot of credit has to go to England.
I wonder, Fabi, what you think about whether people just get very, very cross when Ben Stokes says, it doesn't matter that we're not going to win the Ashes because we're a legacy team, it's all about entertainment. And people who care intensely about winning the Ashes find that quite hard to take.
Look, the one thing they do care, and you only had to look at their faces on Sunday afternoon at Manchester to know they care. They really do care, and they want to win. They want to win the Ashes. Don't be sent off the scent, because they really, really do. They want to win. There's no question about that. And Ben is a competitor, and you see that in his face every time he crosses the line. He's about winning that next series, that next session, and winning the game and winning the series. So, they definitely want to win. I think the interesting thing is that, and it's not surprising that he bristles. And Mel is part of the journalistic team that follow these teams around the world and ask them these questions. And, Titch and I have sat on those tables and tried to answer some of those questions at the end of tough days cricket. But I'm not surprised that he bristles.
You were the guys who got sent out when everything had gone wrong, weren't you?
I was. Only because I talked so much and they knew they had one question.
I was hiding in the back.
Bad day, Farby. We remember those. Bad day, Farby.
But the point is that I'm not surprised he bristles. When you talk about playing Bazball with brains, I mean, you're basically saying that you've been brainless. Now, he when he first started captaining the England Test team, there was a lot of journalists saying that he was reckless in his decision making, he was reckless in his shots that he played, and he got a lot of criticism. Then in the winter, we go and win 3-0 in Pakistan, which was an incredible series win. It was an incredible series of cricket. It was an incredible series win. One, it was great to see the England team back playing Test cricket in Pakistan. Two, it was fantastic fantastic to see the crowds in Pakistan really enjoying the cricket they were watching, and to watch England win 3-0 there was fantastic. And everyone talking about what a genius as a captain he was. One test match into the summer, he declares at the end of day one, and everyone's saying, what's he doing? He's an idiot. We shouldn't have declared. We should have done this. We should have done that. He doesn't declare at Old Trafford, and everyone's saying, oh, he batted on for too long. You can't win. And in many ways, he knows that, and Brendan McCullum know that. They know that goes with the territory. That there's only been once in this series where I got so frustrated as a cricket fan and was shouting at my television when England were 180 for one, and you're watching Nathan Lyon limp round the boundaries, out of the series, he's done. And Nathan Lyon, I think, is one of the biggest factors England have got back into this series, because he has been the thorn in everyone's side, and certainly England's side, in the last 3-4 Ashes series, because he bowls first innings overs brilliantly. He allows their seamers to rest. He allows them to only play 3 seamers. Their selection has changed enormously throughout this Test series, and they're really not sure where to go. And it's tough on Murphy because he's a young, inexperienced spinner, and it's really tough on him. But it's thrown Australia's balance. And interestingly, the 2 spinners not being available, Leach at the start of the series through England's balance, and then the same with Nathan Lyon going out. And at that point, when Nathan Lyon went out of the series, and it was obvious he was done, and England then started taking on all that short ball for sort of 50, 60 minutes there, and threw that Test match away because of what was pretty daft cricket. And as I say, I was shouting at my television saying, just let it go, let it go, let it go. Let them burn themselves out for 50 minutes and we'll go on to win this game. So, but at the same time, and James is absolutely right, the way that they've played, that 98% of the time, as a genuine cricket fan, I have absolutely loved the way they've played. It's been brilliant to watch. I admire them, and it's really difficult. It's one thing saying we're going to go out and play without fear, we're going to go out and play this expansive way, and we're going to be a legacy team, but actually to do it at international cricket and have success, I genuinely can't tell you how exciting it's been. But the odd time you do get a bit frustrated and you think, actually, do you know what? It's really worth it in the end.
The TMS Podcast on BBC Sounds. Jill Scott's Coffee Club.
We are back. I'm so excited for the second series, Ben.
It's going to be so exciting, bigger and better this year.
We've got the Lionesses England manager, Serena. Wow, as if we got Serena.
I'm happy that I've seen her a couple of times after the Euros. More on TV than in live.
Oh.
Good to see her now here.
Let's not forget as well, Jill, we've got to hear about all your antics in the jungle too.
Every now and then, there'd just be a tannoy going, Jill, you are not allowed to leave camp that way. So I was constantly getting in trouble.
Jill Scott's Coffee Club. Listen on BBC Sounds.
Let's talk then about Australia, who started their English summer at the Oval in the World Test Championship final, where they beat India, and they finish it at the same ground, looking to win the Ashes outright on English soil for the first time since 2001. And if they do manage to do that, Mel, what will it mean for them?
I think it'll be enormous for them. Just knowing how long it's been, there's the sense of time. But also, I mean, they had pretty clear objectives when they came over to England. One was to win the World Test Championship. Okay, that one's done. One was to retain the Ashes. Well, that one's done. Whether or not it should actually work that way with retention, I guess that's an argument for another day that I think is worth having. And it's the third one to tick off. And as I mentioned at the start of this show, you know, it is really, really hard to win away. So they are 3 pretty big items to tick off. It's been interesting to see some of the criticism around Pat Cummins' captaincy and suggestions that he should be dropped as captain. He certainly had a bad week in Manchester. He both bowling and I think captaincy as well, where it just felt like he was just chasing the game all the time. Fielders running everywhere. It looked like it was affecting his bowling. But overall, you know, they've won 2 tests. They've drawn 1. They won the World Test Championship. It hasn't been a bad tour, you know. And they've played some great cricket. They've come up against a really big challenge, and a challenge that they haven't faced before in this England team, playing the way they have. And at times it has felt like, for all the saying, you know, we're not going to let it affect us, we're aggressive, we're going to play our own way, they have had to change how they've done things. And I actually think that's made for fascinating cricket. So if they were able to win at the Oval, I just think that would be a huge achievement for Pat Cummins as captain, perhaps shutting up some of his critics at home as well. Maybe a bit more of that tall poppy syndrome that I was talking about as well, that comes to everyone who's successful at some point in Australia. And also for the team itself. Again, a team that, there'll be players who probably won't play in the next Ashes series in Australia, or at least we know of at least one. So, it's huge for them, and they'll have that in mind. And also just the fact that many of them were here in 2019 when they didn't get the job done, and that has kind of rankled with them ever since.
It's amazing, isn't it, what 2 days of rain does. The journalists all sit up in the press box. They've got 2 days to think of something to chat about. They've retired 6 of the greatest players ever off, and they decided that Pat Cummins is a terrible captain. It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, as you said there, Mel, they've won the World Test Championship against a fantastic Indian team. They played brilliantly in that. They went 2-0 up in the Ashes. Haven't won here since 2001. We had Steve Smith with us at Hove, which I think went under the radar. I don't think anyone realised he came and prepared for the Ashes brilliantly with us at Sussex. But it was so obvious that he wants to win in England. He's desperate to win in England, and he probably thinks this is his last opportunity to do that. And he said that on a few occasions with us, that it's probably his last chance. So if they go away having won the World Test Championships, they win the Test match here at the Oval, and they go away having won the series 3-1, and you're still talking about Pat Cummins not being a great captain and not being a great leader. It is remarkable, but it just shows, we were talking about Stokesy earlier, how our media have jumped on it, and it's incredible. I find that the Australian former players and media, I think they are so tough in terms of their criticism, and yet this could be an unbelievable summer for the Australian cricket team, led brilliantly, I think, by Pat Cummins.
We'll come back to that in just a second, actually, exactly what you say. We'll hear from Pat himself in a moment. But James, just a thought on Steve Smith, because, I mean, he's got something to prove, hasn't he? Because it's not been a vintage series for him. Marnus Labuschagne got some runs at Old Trafford, but again, he's not perhaps lived up to his high standards. Usman Khawaja has played brilliantly well at times too. But what do you think this Australian team want to prove at the Oval?
Yeah, well, they've got I was going to say they've got a lot to prove, but they don't. It's just like Steve Smith. He doesn't have much to prove to many people. With his Test record is quite phenomenal. Obviously, only averaging 31, he'll be bitterly disappointed, and that's why, for me, this Ashes is so close as well, because I don't think, credit to England, I don't think Australia have played their best cricket, and that he's a huge player for them, Steve Smith. Labuschagne just scored that 100, which is going to boost his stats, but they haven't played their best cricket. So they'll be wanting to finish on a high. They'll obviously be wanting to win 3-1 in this series and put it to bed. And I find it extraordinary, just going back to Pat Cummins, I find it extraordinary the criticism he's received. His record as captain is excellent. He's a great leader, and obviously there's many ways of leading other than just tactics on the field. Yes, everybody as captain can always get things better on a day's play, and he's made some mistakes this series, as everybody does in individual little sessions. But he's a great leader off the field. He's a really good leader on the field, and his record suggests that, and he's the best seam bowler in the world. So I don't think he's got much to prove. So I think this negative chat about Pat Cummins is amazing to listen to, really.
Let's hear from Pat Cummins then, shall we? He's played all 5 tests this summer, including the World Test Championship final, and he's been speaking to Jim Maxwell ahead of the final test.
We'll start with congratulations. You've won the World Championship. You've retained the Ashes. You're the first Australian team to have done that. That's a huge feather in your cap, and now you're going to win at the Oval, aren't you?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, that's the plan. No, it's been a great tour. Last week wasn't our best week, and there's been a bit of conversation on that, but we've done some brilliant things this tour so far, like you just mentioned. So, yeah, to come here to the Oval, we're all really motivated, and, we get a win here. It doesn't get much better than the tour that we've had.
What have you learned about yourself and your captaincy over the last 7 weeks? I think you've always got to be really open-minded to adapt and change, and
I know that's always been true, but I think in these last 6 weeks, it's highlighted that. It's been really good fun actually. I've enjoyed being out there, and it feels like there's something going on all the time, which I enjoy. It's fun. So I feel like I've learned a lot, and hopefully take a few of those lessons into this week.
You're amazingly resilient. You said that 4 years ago, come this test match, you had maybe run out of steam. Where are you at the moment?
I feel great. Bowled, I think, less this series, or feels like that anyway, than I did in 2019. That fourth test match in 2019, I bowled, I think, 50-odd overs, 20-odd on the last day. It took a lot out of us quicks, but I feel really good. Had 5 days off bowling, so ready to go.
What's the sort of mental state of the side having got away with that game, as it were, after the mauling from Crawley? What's the attitude in the team about bouncing back? Have they lost any confidence?
It's been a great few days. Everyone's been really excited. I thought yesterday's training session was fantastic. Everyone turned up with a real appetite to get stuck into the nets, and it's been positive. I think everyone's knows that it wasn't our best week, and we can do better with bat and ball. And we've got, luckily we've got a pretty strong body of work over the last couple of years to reflect on, and know that it was just a bad week and make amends for it this week.
This pitch normally turns by day 4 or 5. How good is Todd Murphy to take advantage of those conditions?
Oh, he's brilliant. We're so lucky that we got someone like Todd to step in if we play a spinner, after losing Nate. So Nate's got a really good record here. Even first innings, I think he's got as many wickets as second innings. So, if we go that way, we know we've got a great asset in Toddy.
If we play a spinner, says Pat Cummins. I'll come back to that in a second. But Mel, you wrote a terrific piece in the Wisden Cricket Monthly about Pat Cummins. So you interviewed him at the start of the series. And he's, this idea of him being, or the Australian approach being un-Australian, do you think that is that a thing? Are they un-Australian? What does un-Australian even mean?
I've never understood what that means. Basically, people just say that about something that they don't like. It's a bit like the spirit of cricket. I can't tell you what it actually means, this whole un-Australian thing. It's an interesting one. He's very much a captain for the modern age. Part of sometimes the backlash he gets from at home is from certain sort of sections of people who think that he's too woke, and that sometimes comes into criticism of the cricket, and we sort of make jokes about he's too they've lost that game because he's too woke or whatever it is. It's just ridiculous, of course. But the thing I like about him, and certainly it was a big thing about that piece that I wrote, that he's quite comfortable in his own skin. And so he's comfortable in being able to say what he believes or he thinks if he wants to stand for something, because he realised from very early on, you look at the way that his captaincy started with the very messy exit of Justin Langer. And that really caused a lot of criticism for him. And he just realised that basically, whether you do something or you don't do it, you're going to get criticised for it. And it's almost like the criticism that we were talking about for Ben Stokes, when he declares one time, he declares another time, he gets lauded for it, and then he gets absolutely blasted for it. So that's certainly something that Pat Cummins has realised. The other thing that's extraordinary and shouldn't be glossed over is it is a remarkable feat for a player who played his first test match as an 18-year-old and then didn't play another test for 6 years, because his body was too fragile, and wondered if he was ever going to be robust enough physically to play test cricket extensively. Has just gone through and played as many tests as he has in such a short period of time, starting with that World Test Championship, and he's going to play another one tomorrow. As you can tell, I'm all croaky and hoarse. This is my 8th test in 8 weeks, and it's got to me, and I'm just watching.
Listen, I don't think I've had much of a voice since Lords, to be honest, Mel, talking about that. But I mean, Fabi, it's the point that you made, actually, isn't it? When you've got, big former captains who are sitting there in the commentary boxes. I mean, England have it as well to an extent as well. But there is this kind of chipping away, this constant sort of undermining from whether it's people who are here or people back home in Australia. It's tough to deal with.
It is, and look, there's a lot of people that like to share their views, and that's great. That's one of the great things about sport. You all get to share your views, and whether it's with your mates or whether it's former Test captains, they get to share their views in the media. And I think going right back to the first Test match at Edgbaston, to see Australia having sweepers out on the offside and the leg side, that for me is the un-Australian bit. That the almost playing not on the front foot, not being quite as aggressive. And Trevor Bayliss, when he was coach of England, one of the things that we never quite got right with our Test match team, our one-day team, fantastic, and obviously we know what happened with that. But Test cricket, we never quite got it right. Trevor always wanted to play front foot attacking cricket. He wanted to play 2 of the top 3 being attacking positive batters, because that's what Australian cricket is about. He was one who was happy to declare early. He was always pushing, but Cookie was a little bit more reserved. He wanted 2 batters at the top, a bit like him. Now, they never quite got that balance right between them. Morgan and Bayliss worked brilliantly, but I think you look at this Australian team and a lot of former greats who were brilliant players and some great captains. I don't think they've appreciated the way that this Australian team have played at times. But what you have to say is, at the end of the series, if Australia win this Test match at the Oval, they win 3-1. It was the right way to play. And Mel's absolutely right. Cummins is a fantastic bloke. He is a legend of a bloke. His team love him. You can see they absolutely love him. And that's half the battle as a captain, having your team wanting to follow you and be with you. And you can see that. And, it's... One of the things that always intrigues me about the Australian team, it's always the captain who is absolutely at the pinnacle. You never hear anything about Andrew McDonald, and it's always been the same over the last 20, 25 years. It's Steve Waugh's team, it's Michael Clarke's team, it's now Pat Cummins' team, and they're very much out there to be shot at. But I guess the Australians love to see their team playing very aggressive front foot cricket, and perhaps at times they've tried a different way, and at the moment it's been pretty successful for them.
And we should say as well, you point this out in your piece as well, Mel, that there's a lot of pantomime hatred, isn't there, between the teams and all of this kind of roughy-tufty stuff. But you made the point that the Barmy Army, when Pat Cummins' mother was dying earlier this year, they did a tribute to her, to Maria, at Wellington during that New Zealand series, and clearly that's something that he appreciates. And we'll put all of this stuff behind us at some stage, and actually remember what we're all about and what the friendships are that go deep in these two countries. But I mean, James, to go back to the question of who's going to play in the Test match tomorrow, and the idea that Australia might not pick Todd Murphy, is it possible that they might go in without a spinner?
Yeah, it is possible because they did it in the last game, but I think it would be wise to get a spinner in, given how one-dimensional they were in terms of they didn't have a pace-off or a proven pace-off option. Yes, they had Head, they got Smith, they got Labuschagne, but not a out-and-out off spinner or spin bowler to turn to. And as a captain, that's not ideal. You don't have somebody that you can take the pace off and somebody that you can rely on. And Todd Murphy, yes, he hasn't played many games, but he's got a wise head on young shoulders, and he's a good, canny operator. He's a smart operator, and I imagine he might play. But it's going to be tough to fit him in, because obviously you don't want to drop one of those all-rounders for Australia. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do.
It wasn't a ringing endorsement, though, was it, in that interview with Pat? When he's saying if we play one, and he's brilliant. I mean, you do that. Of course, you're going to talk your team. He's never going to say, well, actually, he's inexperienced and he might struggle on that pitch. He's never going to say that. But I would doubt very much the way that he spoke. And I think, Titch, you're right, that the balance of their team, and that's why I go back to Lords and say that, Nathan, Lyon going out of their team is a huge blow for them. It's a huge blow for the Australian team. I wouldn't be surprised if they go in without a frontline spinner tomorrow. That's how I would see it.
I saw an interview, and Pat Cummins said it's a very similar surface to that World Test Championship final. And in that, both teams needed to turn to their spinner, and it did take a little bit of spin. So if it's going to be a similar surface, it will be interesting if they don't go in without a frontline spinner.
I be amazed if they didn't in so many ways, just because we know what the Oval is like as well. And also their selection for Manchester was based so much on the weather. And that's a risk because it doesn't always pan out that way. How often do we see rain forecast and then it doesn't show up? So they went, not with a spinner in Manchester, and also they went with the 2 all-rounders because that bolstered their batting lineup. And in the end, it was Mitch Marsh and Cameron Green who saw out the final overs that were bowled on day 4. I think a bit might depend just on how the players pull up. I would actually suspect that if they end up going with 1 all-rounder, they'd be more likely to plump with Marsh just because of the series he's had. And I think he's been more effective than Cameron Green, who's sort of been in and out and is a great player, but hasn't necessarily had the impact. It would be quite something if they ended up not playing a spinner again on this surface that we're used to seeing here at the Oval.
But the same exactly would be said about Old Trafford. See, I think, abrasive surface, you play a spinner there. And that's what leads me to think I don't think they will. I think they'll stick with their seam attack. But as I say, that's my view.
Just wanted to finish by reflecting on this series, because I know we've only got we've got one more test to go, but we might not all be together as a group between now and the end of next week. So at the very start of the series, I did the preview show for Edgbaston, and I picked up this book, this kind of hard-covered, lined notebook, which was empty at the time. And I said, I wonder what kind of things I'm going to be writing in this book. What will the stories be of this Ashes series? And I kind of now feel, looking at it, that it's like one of those books that you read on holiday and you rattle through it because it's so exciting. And then you can't really, at the end of it, you think, I need to start and read it all again because I can't get to grips with what we've just witnessed and what we've experienced, because there have been these extraordinary highs, there have been these remarkable moments. There was Zach Crawley hitting the very first ball of the whole Ashes for 4. Mel, you and I, as we've said, we've both covered 8 test matches this summer, with the 5 Ashes tests, the women's, the World Test Championship final and the England-Ireland game. What have you written in your, whether it's an actual notebook or in your notebook in your head?
Oh, wow. So many things. I mean, I do think that Zach Crawley first shot was just one of the most extraordinary moments that I can remember. It just was. It set the tone in so many ways, and especially because it was Zach Crawley, who so many people had kind of written him off. So that was wonderful. That whole Edgbaston test and the way it finished had everyone feeling good, even if you're on the losing side or winning side. And I've got to say too, Chris Woakes, just let's give it to Chris Woakes again when he hit those winning runs. That was a marvellous moment at Headingley.
Listen, we can all have Chris Woakes as our man of the series. That's absolutely fine. At this point, he's the man of the series. Fabi is his former director of cricket at Warwickshire as well. You probably agree with that.
Oh, definitely. I'm a huge Chris Woakes fan, and I know that Titch is as well. I mean, he's someone we've discussed many times before. But there's been so many things, and I'm not sure I agree that you enjoyed that first test, whether you won or lost. It was a horrible thing to lose, Mel. I didn't enjoy one part of it. But it has been a brilliant series. And as I say, it's even got me shouting at my television from time to time, because it has been one of those great series where the games have ebbed and flowed, and every game, and James talked earlier about the best teams always win over 5 games, but it has been one of those great series where actually a 2-2 draw in the series with one washed out. I predicted 3-2, and to be fair, I didn't really say which way. Being the eternal optimist, I always think England going to win, but I said it'd be 3-2. I didn't expect rain. I didn't expect rain in Manchester. If it finishes 2-2 with one drawn, it'd be sensational.
You didn't expect rain in Manchester?
No,
You're saying
because
that tongue in cheek?
I'm that optimistic, Ellie. I think it's going to be sunshine from 7 in the morning till 10 at night. It's going to be brilliant. England are going to win 5-0, and Chris Woakes will get man of the series. But it doesn't always work out that way, does it? But I didn't expect rain. I thought it would be 3-2 because they're 2 excellent teams. And the one thing that perhaps we haven't given England enough credit for, the last Ashes series we were absolutely hammered. We were playing against the best team in the world, as both the others have said, and to be going toe to toe and play such brilliant cricket shows how far this England Test team have come, and it's been brilliant to watch. But I really hope England do win it, and I hope that Chris Wokes and Mark Wood played brilliantly in the last test and finish us all off with a great smile, because that would be a great way to finish this series.
So let's finish with you, James. Your reflections and your hopes.
Well, I think it's safe to say it's lived up to expectation. This has been an absolutely fabulous series from both sides. The quality, the standard has been outstanding. I think the biggest talking point for me, and Ben Stokes says he's got no regrets, but that declaration at Edgbaston for me is a huge point in this series. But I hope this final game, again, lives up to expectation and is an absolute belter for everybody watching.